What's up, nerds? This is Jessup, coming back at you with another Modern Warfare video. Today, we're going to be looking at graphics and general settings. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. First, we're going to go ahead and start with the field of view. This is your own personal choice, however, I like mine at 120, gives me the widest angle. If you go to the Extended tab, you have the aim down sights field of view. I like mine affected. Whenever you ADS, whatever your field of view is, it will apply that same field of view to your ADS. That way it doesn't feel weird going from 120 all the way down to, say, like 90 when you zoom in. Brightness, this is personal for everyone. However, I like mine at 55. It makes the screen a little bit brighter, just so I can see things in dark areas. Heads-up display bounds, this is up to you again, whatever your monitor is. Skip movie introduction, I personally leave this on. I don't like to see the movies at the beginning of the game when I start it up. Tooltips as well, I disable these because I don't really need help. Subtitles, I usually keep them on. However, I believe these subtitles play for everything, and I mean everything, so I turn these off. Colorblind settings, I'm not actually colorblind. However, this particular setting right here makes the game brighter. When you're in-game, you'll see what I'm talking about if you use it in-game. It changes some of the hue of the colors, and it makes everything much brighter and easier to see. It's the same concept with PUBG. If you do turn it on, you're given the option of in-game or UI, or both. Personally, I put it on both just to give a consistent feel to the game, but you can put it to whatever you want. Preferably, if you do have it on, make sure you have it to at least set to world. There's no reason to have it on the interface. Text chat, I have this disabled, for obvious reasons. Profanity filter doesn't matter since my text chat is off. Dismemberment and gore, I keep that on. These are your telemetry options. These are what's going to appear in the top left corner of the screen. Frames per second, I like to enable that. Server latency, I like to enable that as well. The GPU and CPU time, I leave those off. It's not necessary. The show mute sound widget, I keep that on in case I accidentally mute the game and I don't know what's going on. Same thing as the show mute voice chat widget, I keep that on just in case. It's just the visual aid to help. Now, let's go ahead and move over to the graphics. This game is, how am I going to put it? Temperamental. This game does not like to work with OBS at all. At all. So, I'm going to be covering the best OBS options as well, but this is honestly a chunk of where it starts. You can fiddle around with OBS all you want, but it comes down to your in-game settings more than your OBS settings. And that sounds weird and counterintuitive, but I've done a lot of testing of this game. It honestly has to do with the game itself. Let's go ahead and get started with my optimal setup. And there's very specific reasons to this. I currently have it in full screen borderless. However, a lot of people would say run it in full screen. To my knowledge, Modern Warfare runs with DirectX 12. And DirectX 12, again to my knowledge, does not natively support full screen. So I'm going to use full screen borderless. The other reason is that when I'm actually using full screen, the game crashes, OBS crashes, there's a plethora of stutters, skips, it's laggy, it doesn't work well. So I think they programmed a pseudo full screen into the game. Because again, as far as I'm aware, DirectX 12 doesn't natively support full screen. So I'm not sure how they did that. Monitor display, that's up to you obviously. Pick your, main monitor that you're going to use. Display adapter, pick the graphics card that you're going to use. I know some people playing on laptops, they have two graphics cards, usually an integrated APU and a dedicated GPU. Go ahead and pick your dedicated GPU. If you don't know, it's usually on the sticker of your laptop, like on the wrist pad right there, or on the box, or look online, somewhere along there. Render resolution. This simply ups the render resolution using an anti-aliasing method inside the game. I personally keep this at 100. For those of you who want better fidelity, but not at the full cost of, say, going 4K if you're running 1080p, I recommend running it at 130 or 133, whatever you prefer. Remember, this does bump up your VRAM usage because it's essentially rendering a higher resolution. But that being said, most people shouldn't have to mess with this. Aspect ratio, I usually leave this automatic. You can change it to whatever your actual aspect ratio of your monitor is. However, I mean, if you just leave it, it'll automatically do it for you, so there's no reason to fret over it. VSync, syncing every frame, I leave this off. If you leave it off, you're going to get screen tear, and that essentially because the way the monitors reproduce our image is an interlace method, so it looks like slices of a frame going across the screen. However, if you don't like this, you can go ahead and turn on VSync. You'll have a little bit of input lag because it makes sure that every frame is synced up to each other. It's a personal choice. If you're trying to do competitive stuff, I recommend keeping it off. You need the fastest response time as possible. If you're having a casual playthrough, playing campaign, doing co-op missions, you can leave it on then. But, I mean, in general, I leave it off. Custom frame rate. If you're on a laptop and you're trying to save power, enable custom frame rates, and then change your custom frame rates to whatever they should be. For example, if it's off in the background, the default is 30. However, again, a lot of people are on laptops, and sometimes you can only run 30 frames in this game. So, you could drop that down. That way you save power while you're alt-tabbed. While you're in the menu, there's no reason, honestly, to have it go above 60 Hz. Even if you have a 144 Hz monitor, there's honestly no reason. It's a menu. So you can leave that at 60, you can put it at 30, well, 30 is a little low, but you can put it really anywhere you want. If you're trying to save power, lower it. If you don't care about power, you're in a desktop and you're at a house or whatever, something like that, then you can go ahead and leave it as is. So I leave mine at custom with the in-game and menu cranked to the max at 300. The reason for this is I was doing some benchmarking and I had some issues with seeing what changes were happening, so I needed to increase my menu limit. NVIDIA highlights. This only works if you have NVIDIA GeForce Experience downloaded. Generally, whenever you get like double kills, triple kills, or merciless or what have you, the game will automatically store that footage into a file that you specify. Well, if you don't specify it, it goes directly into your C drive, I don't remember where it goes. But again, NVIDIA highlights only works if you have NVIDIA GeForce Experience downloaded, and you have it enabled in GeForce, and you have it enabled in-game. I find it's not the best method if you were a YouTuber or streamer or something like that and you're trying to capture highlights. It's better to always do it manually, that way you have control over it. Because I noticed I played, I think it was 12 or so hours the other day, and it only captured 2 highlights. I know you would say get good, but to be honest, I think it was kind of buggy, because there were times I was getting like triple kills and quad kills, and it would never track it. But I remember one time I threw a Molotov into a house, killed one guy, and it said highlight. So it kind of like, it's frustrating. So I would personally never use this if you're a dedicated streamer or YouTuber or what have you. The restarting the shaders installation. Sometimes people's games will bug out, so you'll need to do this occasionally. This takes a long time. I have my game on an SSD. I have a 2600 CPU. I have a 2070 Super. I have a beefy machine. It still takes a long time, no matter what. So just be prepared if you actually do this, that you're going to sit here for a while. So the Sdr Color Space. This is monitor versus TV. So if you're on a monitor, just go ahead, use 2.2 sRGB. If you're on a TV, go ahead and use the other one. Alright, so let's go ahead and get into the things that everyone came here for. Texture resolution. I like to have performance while making the game look pretty. So I'm going to leave that personally on high. Some people may have to leave that on normal. That's totally fine. Normal looks great. Texture filter and Tropic. Essentially, you can see textures at harsher angles. Instead of looking at something straight on, you'll be able to look at it from an angle, and you'll be able to still see what the texture is projected onto that static mesh. I preferably leave this on high. It doesn't take much processing power, to be honest. Low, high, it's pretty much negligible. Even if you're running on an old laptop from, say, like 2010 or something, anisotropic filtering will pretty much be negligible. However, if you do need that 1-2 extra frames, then go ahead and turn it off. But for me, I keep textures, texture resolution, and texture filtering anisotropic high. Particle quality. This will essentially increase the resolution at the texture of the particle quality mesh itself. I keep this on low. It's not really needed. If you want more performance, you can go ahead and keep it on low. If you want, better fidelity, better graphics, keep it on high. Bullet impacts, for competitive advantage, I like to keep it on. Now, this may sound weird, but knowing where bullets have hit will help you sometimes. Not all the times. I'd say this would help you in, say, 1 to 2% of your situations. Tessellation, I preferably keep this off. There's no reason to have it on. All it does is suck up performance and make the game pop a little bit more. And what I mean by pop is static meshes are made of polygons, and specific areas such as like roads and rocks and stuff like this, tessellation increases the not polygon count, but increases the depth at which they're raised. So, for example, if you have a rocky road, if you increase the tessellation, the road becomes bumpier, a little bit sharper, a little more 3D. It takes a texture and essentially makes it 3D, quote unquote. So I turn that off. It can soak up a decent amount of performance, especially if you're not on a high-end machine. So just go ahead and leave it off. Shadowmap Resolution. If you're going for performance, obviously keep it on low. If you don't care about that and just want the best graphics, go ahead and go to high or extra, or whatever the ultra, extra, whatever it is. The last setting, the maximum setting, it does cost a lot of VRAM, so be careful and make sure you have at least a 6 gig card for that. Just in general, if your machine's weak, just go on low. If your machine's strong, go on high. If you want a competitive advantage, obviously keep everything on low. Cache spot shadows and cache sun shadows. Now, in theory, this is really good. However, in practice, like I said, this game is very buggy, crashes a lot, and does a bunch of things. This is one of the issues I was having. Every time I loaded into a map, it would freeze and then crash the game. I eventually found out that these two were causing the crashes. You're going to have to do a little bit of tinkering, but try turning these off, going into a game, play it, see if it crashes. If it still does, you can go ahead and turn these back on. So for particle lighting, I keep this on low, because I don't really need like super high, flashy, like high resolution light mass, like, spots, like shining everywhere on the map. So I keep that on low. Ambient Occlusion. This essentially adds hard shadows to crevices of static meshes. I guess really only static meshes. So dark corners, like where the ceiling meets the wall or where the wall meets the floor, stuff like that. It gives the scene more depth. Personally, I turn this off because Ambient Occlusion sucks a lot of performance, and I mean a lot of performance. For the little visuals it gives, it's too much, personally, so I keep this off. If you want to play the campaign, I recommend turning this on. It'll make the game look nicer, but if you're playing multiplayer, if you're playing for performance, playing competitive, what have you, keep it off. Screen Space Reflections, SSR, keep this off. The benefits do not outweigh the deficits. I have a 2070 Super, and this thing tanks my frames, so just keep it off. It's not worth it losing like 40 frames just to see a guy run by in a puddle. Anti-Aliasing. Personally, I keep this at SMAA1X. The reason for this is if you go any higher, the game starts to look extremely fuzzy. Now, some of you don't like jaggies at all, but some of you don't like the way that the game looks in the higher AA settings. Now, one way you can combat this is set it to SMAA1X and then change your render resolution to around 130. If that's still not enough, try 150. If that's not enough, go to 2 times. That should help with all the jaggies. But do remember, you will be losing a lot of performance in order to get rid of them. If you don't know what I'm talking about, don't worry. Just set it to SMAA1X or off, whichever one you prefer. Depth of field, obviously always have it off, but if you're trying to look for the campaign cinematic experience, go ahead and turn it on. Filmic Strength, it doesn't matter where it is because I'm going to be having depth of field off, motion blur off, all of that off. I leave it at 1, you can leave it at 0, you put it wherever you want. In game, you're going to see little black dots everywhere. It looks like shadows or something like that. If I remember correctly from the beta, this Filmic Strength was tied to those black dots. If you keep it on low, the black dots get really grainy. If you keep it on 1, the black dots become a little bit more blurry and not as noticeable. So I keep it at 1. Now, I know this doesn't make sense for someone who actually understands game dev and what Filmic Strength does, but for some reason I found that these two were tied together. I don't know why. I don't know why they would do that. I don't know what the thought process is behind that. So I keep it at 1 because it's really disturbing. World motion blur, I obviously keep that off. If you want to turn it on for campaign purposes, you can. Weapon motion blur, again, if you want to keep it on for campaign purposes, you may. However, I don't see the reason to have it in multiplayer competitive. And last but not least is film grain. If you want film grain on for campaign purposes, I highly recommend not to have it turned to 1. 1 means 100%, and that's not very good if you have like crazy things going all over your screen. So I would recommend turning it to like, I don't know, 0.2, 0.3 at the max. But again, it's preference, it's up to you. Now that we've looked over all the graphic settings and general settings, I need to give an explanation as to why I have them on low, not just for performance issues when it comes to FPS. This game is very buggy, laggy, it crashes a lot. So I find that the harder you run this game, the higher chance it'll crash. Now believe me, I have a 2600 and a 2070 Super. I can run this game full settings, maxed out, 4K, 60 FPS. Like, it has no problems whatsoever. At 1080p, this game runs with max settings, everything over 100 frames. Like, this thing goes. But the problem is, the game crashes a lot. And I mean a lot. So the more things that your client has to do, the easier time it'll have to crash. So I like to set everything low as possible, keep textures on high, keep texture filtering on high, turn anti-aliasing to SMAA1X, obviously, leave my Filmic Strength at 1, and that is it. Oh, sorry, bullet impacts. I totally forgot about those. I leave those on as well. But this was my competitive setting / streaming / YouTube / like best options, best graphics options out there right now. So you can change what you want, but this is what I found to work the best. Also, on a side note, if you ever change your graphic settings, I don't care how small it was, reset your game. This game hates, and I mean hates, when you change anything in the graphics, apply the settings, and then keep playing. I guarantee that thing will crash within at least 10-15 minutes. It hates it. So that's my quick tip for you. This is Jessup. I'll see you nerds later. Peace.